Good evening, Packer fans, and welcome to Arman's Titletown Talk. We're excited to have you, and we're really happy to be back here. I'm here with the Arman Bros, and we're here on Sunday, April 19th. We're just a handful of days away from the NFL Draft, and we're going to get into all the analysis, insight, and breakdown on that topic. But before we do, we'd like to give you a reminder to check us out online. Of course, follow us at our website / blog at Arman's Titletown.com. You can find us on Twitter at Titletown_talk. And you can also find us on Facebook by just searching the search bar Arman's Titletown Talk. So without further ado, bros, how are we doing?
Hey, can't complain. Figuring out what quarantine life is all about here, but trying to stay busy as best as we can, and happy to be on with you guys.
Definitely, yeah. Just hanging out down here in Florida. I missed you guys in Virginia. You guys got some golf under your belts. Was super jealous to miss the head-to-head matchups, but just passing the time as best as possible, and looking forward to chatting a little Green Bay Packers football.
Yeah, I think you gotta take the good with the bad, right? And I think it's exciting to get together and talk Green Bay Packers football. And I think as far as what we're going to do here for the first video podcast is get you guys some draft analysis about some of those potential prospects out there. Let's live in the real world and do who we think, give some analysis on picks that we think the Packers could be looking to take at 30 in the first round. And then I think we'll have some fun with it and do kind of a dream scenario. What kind of crazy trade could Goody have up his sleeve to change the course of this franchise? But, with that whole quarantine life and what that looks like, how are you guys getting your sports fix these days?
Yeah, for me, I'm here in, downtown Chicago, smaller apartment, but my beautiful fiance got me a nice putting mat. So I've been doing a minimum 100 putts a day, trying to keep my short game in order. As Adam can attest to, it didn't work out so hot the last time we played together, but I'm doing my best. So that's kind of how I'm keeping busy.
Nice.
Sure, yeah. No, it's same thing basically. Just, getting after it on the golf courses here, living down in Florida. They're kind of living by their own rules. So I've gotten a few more rounds of golf in, I think, than most people around the States. And, just staying active, watching a lot of Packers highlights, Bucks highlights, kind of reminiscing and things of that nature. So, just staying busy.
Nice. Yeah, hoops is definitely a big void that needs filling in my life. And I talked the wife into getting a Pop-A-Shot basketball hoop for the man cave. So I put that together a couple days ago, got the high score up to 107. So, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And obviously a lot of the listeners probably know, as you guys do, I have a 2-month-old daughter, beautiful Grace Ann, and just seeing her growth and development every day has been a blessing. So again, right, taking the good with the bad.
Cool. Well, great to catch up about, some of the quarantine stuff. I think we'd be remiss not to talk about that a little bit, but just kind of kicking things off before we get into the draft analysis part of things. I think, it's important to look back on last year, thinking about the Packers season, 13-3 under first-year head coach Matt LaFleur. Obviously, a lot of big free agent signings with the Smith brothers had a huge impact. The unleashing of Aaron Jones and other things. So before we get into the draft stuff, give us some analysis on how you think 2019 went and kind of your thoughts.
I think as Packer fans, you got to be really happy with the result that we saw on the field. A rookie head coach that there was some question marks with his experience came in, question marks about him and Aaron Rodgers. Could they gel? And Rodgers learning a new offense and all of that. But like you said, 13-3 to go undefeated in the division was pretty sweet. And I think you couldn't ask for more from Goody in terms of the turnaround and what he was able to bring in the offseason. Zadarius Smith, you could make a case, was, the defensive player of the year last year. Definitely a brutal ending. And the 49ers are a thorn in our side that we have to be looking forward to figuring out how we can get to that next tier and take it to the next level. But, really impressed and hoping we can continue that momentum into 2020.
Yeah, and speaking about momentum, I think that's one of the key things. If you go back about a year from today, is all the conversation about can Matt LaFleur create a culture and create some momentum, that already exists with Aaron Rodgers and what he's been able to build. And that was the most encouraging thing that I saw, is that the players really rallied around each other and found kind of this core culture. And that was a big deal, and that's hard to do in just one short season. So I'm excited to see hopefully what will happen in the building on that. But we'll talk about some of the things that could potentially get in the way with that. But exciting stuff for a first year coach.
Right. And looking to the future, we can't, not ignore the elephant in the room, which is the global pandemic that is COVID-19 and impacting really all facets of life. And the NFL is certainly not immune to that. And you see, at least there's been some solace for us as sports fans in, the free agency period and some of the headlines and things that have been happening in the off season, but there's certainly going to be an impact when you talk about that with the virtual draft. A lot of the general managers were pushing back on maintaining the free agency period as well as having a virtual draft. What does this look like? What does it impact? So I want to bring it more Packers centric, and we talk about there's going to be some obstacles, there's going to be some nuance to a virtual draft. What does that mean for the Packers? How are they going to fare, Mitch?
Most definitely, it's something to think about. Looking back over the years, I think we all feel very good about the personnel that the Packers have in the scout room, and I think just the technologically advanced kind of or savvy that the Packers staff has is going to play a big part in this. I trust our scouting really strongly, especially as it relates to offensive line, defensive line, middle linebackers, but there are inevitably going to be variables, circumstances that you can't account for with the virtual draft. And so it'll just be interesting to see how everything plays out, I think.
Very fluid situation. I don't know if you guys did the report about the Saints were trying to get creative and figure out, how do they optimize the situation. And they actually had plans to rent out a brewery and kind of turn the brewery into their, virtual draft command center, which I thought was a pretty smart idea. But just with the variations in the, local restrictions with the stay-at-home orders, all that kind of stuff, the league stepped in and said, you can't do that. We're going to have a level playing field. General managers, scouts, whoever it is, you have to work from home. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and certainly speaks to just the uniqueness of the situation and some of the challenges that each franchise is dealing with. What were you thinking, Shane?
Yeah, talking about some of those challenges, it's pretty unprecedented, right? So at the time you're probably viewing this video podcast, there's going to be a virtual draft that happens on Monday, April 20th, to kind of make sure that teams are all prepared. But when you look at a staff with Goody, obviously this will be his third draft, so he does have a little bit of experience and background, but not as much as a lot of other coaches. And so that makes me a little bit nervous from the Packers standpoint. Is, can he corral his team? Does he have different people or go-to people for certain things that he's looking at, or certain players, and how is that all going to work? Are there backup options? So that makes me a little bit nervous about it being on the younger end of the coaching staff, even though we would expect a younger coaching staff to be more technologically advanced. These are professionals. I think that's all going to be okay, but you can't help but think, hey, there could be some rough patches, and hopefully that Monday virtual test run will fix some of those issues that do come up.
Sure.
It's going to be interesting, most definitely. I think we definitely have confidence in the front office and hope that, advantage or disadvantage, that we'll be on the better end of that spectrum. But let's get into the breakdown and talk some prospects and talk some trade scenarios maybe. I think let's start with the home run dream scenario. It doesn't have to be home run, but we know Goody has a reputation for, if he sees somebody he likes, that he'll give up some capital and move up. And if not, and the value's there, we've seen him do it before, move back out of the first round into the early second round, and kind of take advantage of that situation. To get a first round pick to do that a couple years ago with the Saints was a pretty big deal. They turned that into the Darnell Savage pick, which was nice. But all that being said, we got a lot of scenarios out there. What are you predicting, Mitch, or wishing could happen with a trade scenario?
I'll take the stance of kind of the less is more approach here. I think over the years we've kind of done those incremental trades where we move up a couple of picks and maybe give up a later round pick to get a guy that we really like. I see a position of need at inside linebacker. I think, obviously Patrick Queen from LSU is one guy that's been talked about. I think he goes a little earlier. But the guy I have my eye on is Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. I think could we potentially move from 30 to 27, maybe give up a third or a fourth round draft pick, move up a couple spots and get him, knowing that, the depth chart is pretty bleak at inside linebacker. You lose Blake Martinez, obviously signed Christian Kirksey to a deal, but he's missed a handful of games over the years. And then you have Oren Burks as well. Seattle sitting at 27. They've given up that first round pick, I think the last 8 years. It makes sense. We need a guy that can, plug the middle, that is athletic, that can cover, and is a big run stopper. And I think Murray has shown that in his career at Oklahoma. And so to me, rather than a big jump, could we do something like that, give up a third and acquire a guy like that? That to me,
Packers have that connection with John Schneider. I mean, that's definitely an interesting and reasonable situation you could see unfold.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, we got to get more aggressive here, Shane. I mean, Shane's known as probably the most aggressive Arman brother in general life.
Oh, let's hear it.
I mean, if we're gonna trade up, let's get up into the top half of the draft. Let's look at the wide receiver position, which we know is a position of need for the Packers, and we know that this draft is going to be, extremely rich with wide receiver talent. Let's go after the top guy, and in my opinion, that's Jerry Jeudy of Alabama. And you look at his body of work in one of the most productive offenses across the board. But the key thing that stands out to me about Jeudy is his route running ability. And you look at a lot of the deficiencies that the second and third and fourth options on the Packers wide receiver staff had last year. It was their intelligence and their ability to get in and out of routes and be where they needed to be when Aaron Rodgers expected them to be there. And Jerry Jeudy can be that guy for Aaron Rodgers. He can come in, step in right away, and have an immediate impact. And I think he's the most wide receiver ready guy in this draft. So I'd love to see the Packers move up to 12, potentially trade with the Raiders, give up, obviously their first round pick this year and potentially that first round pick next year, maybe a second round pick, and make that happen and get our wide receiver guy and give Aaron Rodgers the weapon he deserves.
Okay. I mean, we're warming up a little bit. I mean, I definitely took it to heart, this idea of a dream trade scenario and what's the craziest thing you can conjure up that would get us over the hump, right? And get to the ship. And I mean, I swung for the fences, fellas. I mean, we've heard the name OBJ out there on the trade block, supposedly, or maybe not. I mean, the Vikings have been rumored to be interested and supposedly close to a deal with Cleveland. There's obviously ties there between the new head coach of Cleveland, who was the offensive coordinator for Minnesota last year. Minnesota's front office comes out and denies the rumors, which, I mean, that's what the Giants said before they traded OBJ, was he's a cornerstone and we're not going to trade him. But, everybody's got a price for the most part. And the Browns have a need at the offensive line. They've made some moves, but they still have some holes. And honestly, the Packers have a lot of great veteran players that are going to need new contracts next year. And Corey Linsley is one of those guys that I don't know if we're going to be able to pay $8 or $10 million a year on a contract extension in a year or more, where we also have Bakhtiari that's going to need to be extended, Kenny Clark, Kevin King, Aaron Jones. I mean, there's only so much money that can go around, so why not bring in a $20 million a year wide receiver? But again, dream trade scenario, to make it work, you give up Linsley and say a third rounder and bring in OBJ, and you don't have the question mark of a wide receiver with, injury history or maybe not pan out. We need an impact playmaker on, I think, both offense and defense to put us over the top. And I think if we want to swing for the fences with our Hall of Fame quarterback that has a chance to go down as, one of the, on count them on one hand, one of the greatest of all time, we got to get that man another ring and bring that Lombardi trophy back to Titletown.
Well, I think it makes sense too. I mean, you mentioned $20 million a year receiver, but Odell over the next 2 years per his contract is set to make about $14 million. Lindsley is at that 9-10 cap hit space, so it's not as daunting as one would think for a 1 or 2 year kind of fill-in. I don't know, just throwing that in there.
We just need OBJ to stop going to the national championship game and making it rain for the college players and smacking police officers on the behind and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Given some of that stuff too, is the culture fit right? But I mean, certainly it would be a very aggressive and kind of chips all in the middle type move for
right.
But
OBJ and Devontae.
Yeah.
So let's shift out of this fantasy land that I was just bringing us into back to our quarantined at home life right now that we're living, and let's talk more realistic scenario, right, guys? So we're sitting there at 30. When you think about the projections and the prospects that are available, we know that the biggest needs for the Packers is that inside linebacker, wide receiver, depth on the offensive line, defensive line. With all that, you put that into the gonkulator, so to speak, and who do we foresee the Packers taking at 30 if they actually stay there and make a pick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, there's obviously a lot of wide receivers in this draft, but the guy that I really like is from LSU, Justin Jefferson, and I know he's projected kind of in the low 20s, so there's a chance he may not be there, but if he is, I think he'd be an absolute home run pick. He's a 4.4 40 talent, and a couple things that stand out to me about him. One is just the eye-popping stats. You look at the 5 games that LSU played in 2019 against top 10 opponents. Justin Jefferson had over 500 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns in those contests, and those included the national championship game, the Peach Bowl, and the SEC championship game against elite competition. So that's
guy caught 100 passes. I mean, beast.
He's just obnoxious. The second thing is he's got good size, and he's got this crazy ability to make contested catches. And he reminds me of a guy, Greg Jennings, who played for the Packers, of course, just making all those great catches over the middle, getting blasted by Troy Polamalu in the back of the Super Bowl, catching touchdown passes. This is the kind of guy that we need, who can work the middle of the field. He's got to work on his route running a little bit and get a little bit more polish there. But man, he's kind of like a Jerry Jeudy light version and more of a possession guy that I think could come in and make a big impact and definitely be a clear-cut number 2 to Devontae in this offense.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's hard for me at wide receiver to figure out, I mean, who the front office is going to fall in love with and kind of where the value fits. I mean, some of those guys that we really like, it's hard to know, like Jefferson, love him if he's actually going to be there. And for me, one of the safe picks that we might look at is there's a lot of offensive tackle depth. And Ezra Cleveland out of Boise State is a pretty interesting prospect. You look at the offensive line, and, we got Wagner out there, the free agent signing from the Lions, who's maybe more of a stopgap guy. And certainly would be nice to have an insurance policy, a developmental guy that, maybe he's on the sideline for the first half of the season, but if an injury occurs or if Wagner isn't getting the job done, he's the type of guy that could step in and make an impact at offensive tackle. And then a little more splashy pick would be Antoine Winfield Jr. out of Minnesota, the safety. He's got 4.4 speed. He's a guy that'll come up and blitz and stick you, but he's also got great ball hawking coverage skills. And in today's NFL, right, we're talking a lot about the Packers' need for that slot playmaker. Well, you need someone to cover those guys, and Winfield has that slot cover corner capability. And he would be a really exciting guy to bring in, I think, at that position.
Let's make no mistake about it, Shane. I'm completely with you. If Justin Jefferson is there at 30, that is my dream pick, 100%. Love him. Thinking about it, though, a guy that is maybe going to go late to early first round, I look at a slot guy. Adam, you said it's important to cover the slot. Well, you got to have a slot guy worth covering. And since the Packers let Randall Cobb go, who just signed a new deal, I believe out in Buffalo. Is he with Buffalo now? Or Houston on a 3-year deal. I look at a guy from Arizona State like Brandon Ayuk, short, compact guy, really fast playmaker. I've said it before. He reminds me of Brandon Cooks. I know we don't love Brandon Cooks, but a guy that is really shifty in the slot that you can do some fun things with.
He's got the return skills too, which is a nice plus.
Yeah, I think that is more of a realistic thinking. I don't know if he's more of like 7 picks into the second round versus at 30, but I think if he's there and the Packers fall in love with him, I think
Mhm.
certainly a guy to entertain. He did have core muscle surgery in early April, but there's been a number of guys that have had that. Jalen Rieger from TCU, and they seem to be on track to be healthy. So I would be perfectly okay with Ayuk at 30.
Hey, look, when you start talking about the potential for the first couple of years that we had with Randall Cobb and his playmaking ability and impact in the return game and football IQ, the whole deal, I mean, we are definitely all on the same page that that is missing from this offense right now. And I mean, that's certainly a part of the Matt LaFleur offensive scheme as well. I think that would fit in
I
well.
mean, you guys remember Randall Cobb's first play as a Packer, Thursday Night Football, to open up the 2016 season. He returned that kickoff for a touchdown. I have flashbacks back to Cobb, and Ayuk feels like that type of guy. So,
Is that against
uh,
the Saints?
you know, yeah, against the Saints, man, opener. Yeah, that was filthy. I'm not saying he's Randall Cobb, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like the projection. I'd be real comfortable with that pick at 30. Another interesting conversation when we talk about the draft prospects and maybe kind of wind the podcast down. I didn't want to skip over some of the conversations that have been out there from a QB standpoint. And you see some of the mocks out there, and there's a lot swirling out there, but I mean, Tim Boyle's the backup right now. I mean, A-Rod's got plenty of gas left in the tank, but you always got to look to the future. I mean, what do we see the front office's approach to that QB position being in this draft?
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at more of a developmental angle in this regard. So I'm not willing to sacrifice that high end draft capital, whether it be second, third, fourth round. So I'm looking at a guy from FIU. His name's James Morgan. He's truly a project prospect. He grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, played high school ball nearby. The scouts say this guy's just got a massive cannon for an arm, and he's tough as nails. One of the big things, they said about him is that he literally has no touch because he just throws the ball so fast. And so we all know how the other quarterback in Green Bay ended up in that regard. But let's take a chance on somebody like that late in the round, fifth, sixth round, and kind of save our draft capital for other areas of need right now.
We got holes to fill. I mean, I think that's a prudent, approach to take there.
I don't disagree with you guys, no doubt. I do think though that it's always a value play, and so if a guy to me like Jalen Hurts is there, mid to late third round, I think that makes sense. We've had a virtual meeting with him, a very accomplished guy coming from a system in Oklahoma that has seen Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, a plethora of really talented guys just win. I think I would be okay with spending a third round pick on a guy like Hurts. I don't know that he's necessarily a starter in the NFL, but I think, Adam, to your point, where we're not necessarily looking to fill that position for the next couple of years, he would give us a little bit more security, certainly feel better about him over Boyle. I would be completely okay with that. He's, for his downfalls as not being as super instinctual of a player, he's super athletic. And I think that's kind of the way the NFL is shifting. And so could he be there? He's trending towards a second round pick, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's not as much about what the approach will be, but what I hope it won't be. And as we all know, I mean, there's been a long-standing tradition in Green Bay of best available player, right?
Mhm.
And not trying to fit a round peg into a square hole or however that goes, right? And I mean, that certainly led us to Aaron Rodgers. You go back to '05 and taking him, falling from the number 1 or 2 prospect in the draft, falling to us at 24. And I just get nervous about the idea of Jordan Love potentially being there and available on the board at 30. And I would hope that, regardless of what our rating is on him, that we wouldn't be making that kind of move with the amount of years that Rodgers still has left. And, that, to invest that kind of draft capital when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback and an offensive-minded head coach as your play caller, and you were in the NFC Championship game the year before. I mean, I hope we are on the same page generally with thinking we are 1 or 2 playmakers away from getting this thing over the top and getting A-Rod his second ring and bringing that Lombardi trophy back where it belongs in Titletown.
No, I'm definitely with you. I think the sentiment is there. I would be very scared about spending a first round pick on Love. I think it's also valuable to just play a hypothetical. There are a number of veteran free agent quarterbacks out there. Cam Newton's probably the sexiest of them all, but you look at a guy like maybe Jameis Winston, could you bring him in on a veteran kind of shortened deal? I'm curious your guys' thoughts about some of those other guys floating out there in a backup capacity. What you maybe think if we don't go quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to think about bringing in one of those veteran free agents just from a salary cap perspective. I mean, it would have to be on a super cheap deal. And I mean, that's why those guys are out there right now. No one wants to pay them. I mean, there's not a market for a $7 to $10 million a year backup quarterback unless you're John Gruden and you like to have 5 quarterbacks on your roster. I mean, Mariota got that $7.5 million a year, 2-year deal, but Cam Newton's not even in the conversation. Maybe Jameis, maybe Flacco, but I mean, I'll just roll with Boyle.
I get it. I was just
roll with Boyle at that point. I mean, I don't see that as being an option.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. You got to be really careful, especially in our salary cap situation. I do think Flacco could be a good option depending on where things net out after the draft and leading into training camp. Is he still out there? What is he willing to take? Is he willing to come in and kind of give Aaron Rodgers some different perspectives? And he's an experienced, obviously quarterback who's won a Super Bowl. I think he could be a great addition to the team and actually help Rodgers see some things out there that maybe he's lost sight of a little bit. So I like the option, but yeah, you got to be careful as it relates to the salary cap. So either way, I think, we got number 12 and it's just a matter of, as we've talked about today, guys, in this podcast is building and kind of inserting those last 1 to 2 pieces. And you guys have all hit on really great points. I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see how the draft plays out on Thursday, not just from a logistics standpoint, but the Packers have quite a few picks and obviously some pretty obvious areas of need. So as a reminder, everybody continue to follow us on social media as well as on our blog. We're going to continue to post content. We're going to have a post-draft recap where we'll kind of go through and give grades overall on Goody's strategy following the draft. So check us out there. Again, our website, armanstitletown.com. Check us out on Twitter, Titletown_talk, and then search for us on Facebook, Arman's Titletown Talk. Give us a like, interact with us, comment, share all that good stuff. And hey, we look forward to talking to you guys next time. And hopefully we'll get some more video and podcast content out there for you in the ether. So any last words of wisdom, bros?
Go Pack, go. Let's get it done.
Get OBJ in that green and gold soon enough, fellas.
All right. Cheers, gentlemen. Have a good night. Talk to you guys later.